Welcome everyone, I am Don Baugh with Upstream Alliance. I'd like to bring my two co-hosts, Kristen Greenaway with the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum and Mike Lewis with Salisbury University, to welcome you all. Just by way of business, what we'll do is welcome you all. If the panelists, as we speak, can come on up and have a seat, that would be great. And then we're going to get together with some fun on the panel. So thank you all for coming out on this rainy day, making a good decision, because I think we're going to have some fun. And I promise you, you will laugh and question and cry, and you already laughed, so now we have to question and cry a little bit. So I am Don Baugh. I'm the president of a startup nonprofit, Upstream Alliance. We're just 2 years old. We have two major programs. One is leadership, trying to work with networks of leaders, particularly giving them real-life experiences in the outdoors, including a 3-day kayak trip last fall on Smith Island when we launched the idea for this experience today. We also have a program in environmental education where we're trying to green school systems from the top down, working with superintendents around the nation, now in 26 states. Next week we'll be in Nashville, Tennessee with those superintendents that want to turn the systems green. So we saw some critical pathways we wanted to invest our energies, and we're excited to have the support we do. We have offices in Annapolis, in Graysonville, in Philadelphia, Ann Arbor, Portland, Oregon, and Salt Lake City, Utah. And those offices look a whole lot like someone's living room. So welcome everyone. And I'd like to say I'm so pleased that Upstream Alliance could, we're the small person in the room, but we have our big giants with us, and really delighted to share the stage with the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum and Salisbury University. So Kristen, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Don. Culture's always changing, and at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, our role and interest in these disappearing islands is to be the advocate for helping to preserve the tangible and intangible heritage of these cultures, of their cultures. And that's, we see as a very integral role in the museum and its activities. So we're honored to be here. Thank you, Don, and we're honored to help support that culture and the heritage of these disappearing islands. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mike Lewis from Salisbury University in the Department of Environmental Studies, and we think of ourselves as a regional university that happens to be in the world's best place to study interactions between people and their environment. And the reason we have a Department of Environmental Studies is because we think that the traditional disciplines like biology and geography and economics and political science need to be in conversation with each other. And events like today, what we have with the Upstream Alliance is organizing, is exactly what we try to promote: conversations between different people and different stakeholders to talk about the ways in which we understand this wonderful environment that we all get to live in here on the Chesapeake.
Very good, and I'm going to transition up stage, so thank you all. So while we're transitioning here, just as a little note, you probably have guessed, listening to Mary Ada, is that they don't do this for a living. I mean, they catch our crabs and oysters and make our cakes for a living. So, we twisted their arm a little bit and asked them to tell the story that we think is an important local story. It's also a story that's been told in 21 countries around the world in the last 6 months, which are 21 countries came to interview Ooker from Tangier about the sea level rise issue and erosion and the controversy there. So this is a big issue, and it's our issue. This is our opportunity to tell, and to tell it in an honest, straightforward way. This is no slant from the media. This is straight from the horse's mouth. So I'm so honored that we've got such a distinguished panel, starting obviously with Tom Horton, who you all know is the fine author of Chesapeake Bay books. Lonnie Moore, who is one of the top watermen on Tangier, and probably the most respected person in the entire entire Chesapeake Bay area. People know and love Lonnie for lots of good reasons. Mayor Ooker Eskridge, as I mentioned before, he has become quite the center of a lot of international publicity. Been on CNN, he's been on the Samantha Bee show. He's got a call from our friend in the Western Shore, and so we'll talk more about that later. But the mayor of Tangier, they don't make a lot of money as a mayor. They're really commercial fishermen that also help legislate for the town. To his left is Dr. Bill Boicourt. Bill is a scientist emeritus at the University of Maryland, and he is the world's expert in tides and currents and estuaries, including the Chesapeake Bay. So when we think about sea level rise and erosion, he's the guy you want on this stage. Obviously, to his left, a nervous wreck, she says, but it looks like she did a great job. I can't wait to taste the cake. Give me the cake, Marietta. How about it? I talked her into this and said, come on, Marietta, we can go next door to the restaurant. They'll cook it, no problem, you know. We got it all set up. So thank you, Marietta. We can't wait. But Marietta has many, many different hats. But besides the woman who is the reason why the state dessert is the Smith Island Layer Cake, she's just one of the leaders of the community in many different ways, obviously living in Smith Island for her entire life. And to her left, I'm delighted to say, as a young boy I watched grow up on Smith Island, is now returned after 14 years as the pastor. So Pastor Everett Landon is from Rhodes Point and has a unique perspective, being both from the island, but also in an island that has no government. The church essentially forms the government there, so he has a unique role there. So he's got, I think, lots of stories and insights to share. So the last thing I'll say is that my first introduction to the islands was in October 1978, when I was sent down by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation to start an education program there. And at that time, the pastor, the previous pastor, Pastor Zoltenhofer, pulled me aside in a very serious tone, said, in 350 years, no one has ever come from the outside and lived in this community. This community is a virgin. Don't mess it up. So since that time, I became lifelong friends with many of these people, and you'll see a different perspective here, different politics, and different ways of looking at things. But one thing you'll see, I'm sure, is there's an integrity there. What I know, when Lonnie tells me something, it's pretty much always true, except this morning when he told me that he forgot the date, and this was next week, he thought. But, you know, there's a high level of sincerity and integrity, and so when they speak the truth, and they speak from their hearts. So thank you, and what we're going to do is Tom is going to give some perspective, who lived on the island, and then we're going to open it up for kind of personal kind of insights as to who they are, and then I'll ask a series of questions. At the end, if there's time, we'll ask questions from the audience. So thank you all for coming out, particularly on such a rainy day, but let's have some fun.
Well, thank you, Don. I'm Tom Horton, and I guess my job is to kick off this afternoon of discussing sea level rise, erosion, and the future of Smith and Tangier Island. I actually thought it was a good chance to bring along one of my favorite pieces of, not really driftwood, but wood. This thing's the coolest shape. I found it 30 years ago when I lived down at Smith Island, coming out of the shore of a place called Smith Gut Point, down on the southwestern quadrant of the island. Now, what's interesting about that wood is that's black walnut root, and I picked up quite a bit of it out there. Black walnut does not grow where I found it, in the marsh, in the salt. It needs high, well-drained soils. This is not fossil wood. This wood is probably centuries old. Obviously, that meant big changes on Smith Island in the course of 4, 5, 6 centuries, finding that black walnut out there in what's now marsh. It would be tempting to say, well, that's sea level rise, except during the last several centuries, until very recently, not too much sea level rise. That's pretty much erosion. What was once high ground for black walnut is now marsh. Erosion and sea level rise, and we could have a pretty good debate on whether it's this or that. I think it's both. We're going to talk about that today. You know, in most of my lifetime and these guys' lifetimes, sea level in the bay has come up, you know, yay much, not a lot. We do have some pretty good scientific evidence that that has changed, and Bill Boicourt will fill you in on the details in recent years, decades, and that we are going to be looking at a much more rapid rate of rise. In fact, if you look at the projections for 2100, you may hardly see these islands if the science is right, and I believe it is right. However, well, let me back up. There's a tendency, and I have been guilty of this, to say, okay, that's right, these islands in a century are toast. To just say, well, then people should get out of there. But I've had to rethink that in the last several years, because humans, we don't live by the century. We live by the minute, the hour, the week, the day, the year, maybe the decade at most, but that's probably an illusion. So, you know, sea level may someday cover these islands. However, what about the lifespan of the people here in this room? These islands are unique cultures. They are marvelous educational assets. Don and I have been bringing students from universities, elementary schools, teachers, professors to these islands for decades now, and it is by the good grace and nature of the Lonnie Moores and the Ooker Eskridges, the Marietas and her husband Dwight sitting over there trying to hide in the corner. They are almost infinite in their patience with stupid student questions, with showing them how they shed soft crabs, how they catch oysters, explaining over and over. I mean, I don't know if I would have that patience. These places are also big tourist magnets. A lot of people have experiences there. You know, there are very, very few places left in this modern world where nature drives people. Usually people have pretty much driven nature often into a corner, paved it, developed it, sliced and diced it. Down here, these guys, you know, it makes a difference to where they go to work, whether they make any work, which way the wind's blowing. That's just not true any longer for most of us. So these are places that even if you think they may be gone in 2100, it's worth some serious thought and discussion about what we can do to help them stay in place in the coming decade or two or three or four or whatever that may be. And you know, in the case of Tangier, we're probably looking at a bill for 25, 30 million bucks to put the rock in place that would give them a new lease on life. Will that stop the sea if it rises 6 feet by 2100? No. Will it enable a generation or two more of people to enjoy it, to learn from it, to visit it? People there to make their lives as they've been accustomed to? Absolutely. Audubon and the state of Maryland and the federal Fish and Wildlife agencies have already kind of made that decision, spending several $1 million to pump up marshes around Dorchester County, knowing that this isn't the final solution. It'll buy 20, 30 years for a lot of endangered wildlife. So, you know, these are discussions we need to be having. You know, I once wrote about Smith Island. I could have been writing about Tangier, that if you wiped everybody out and started over again, I think that combination of crabs and oysters and rockfish and marshes would probably produce, in the goodness of time, something like Tangiermen and Smith Islanders all over again, because the land has a way of shaping culture like that if the land is still operating in its natural state. I'll just close. A thing that's always intrigued me is Dwight over there. We were born 3 months and about 25 miles apart. Smith Island, Crisfield for him, and Salisbury for me. Grew up and lived and made our careers in totally different universes. That would not happen if we were born 25 miles apart on land. Water miles are different. They really create some pretty unique stuff. So I think that's probably enough for me for now.
Well, you're unique enough, Tom, but let's talk about the unique stuff on Smith Island. And so what we'll do is we'll start with the 4 Smith Islanders and ask each of them to introduce themselves, not just your name, but a little bit about a story about you that captures who you are. And then we'll come back and ask questions. So, Mr. Moore, Captain Moore.
My name's Lonnie Moore, born and raised on Tangier. Or not born, I was born in Crisfield. 2 days later lived on Tangier and been there the rest of my life. And, have no intentions living, whether the sea level rises or not. I don't think it is. I've been living there all my life, and I've seen the tide come and I've seen it go many times. And for the past 3 years, I've never had water on my property. But prior to 3 years ago, it was coming 7, 8 times a year. So in my eye, things are going the opposite direction. Mr. Boicourt might say a little something different about that, and why. But
I'm listening, Lonnie.
okay, all right, listen now. But anyway, I've got my wife, of 37 years, almost 38 years, and my daughter who has 4 kids, her husband and 4 kids, that live on the island. I know that no matter how fast the sea rises, I'm going to spend the rest of my days there, no matter what. But I do fear for my daughter, and especially for my grandchildren, and I don't believe it's sea level rise. I think it's an erosion, problem. So that's what we need to address is the erosion first, and then we can talk about the sea level rise after our island is protected. And that's my thought.
And then to his left is the mayor, as I mentioned before, who he can go by Mayor Eskridge, or you can also call him Ooker, which is what he prefers. But go ahead, Ooker. Tell us about that.
Yeah, my name is James Ooker Eskridge. I'm the mayor of Tangier Island. First and foremost, I'm a commercial waterman, crabbing, fishing, oystering. That's what keeps the ball rolling on Tangier is the seafood harvesting. That's how we put food on the table and put our kids through college. So it's all about the seafood. But being mayor gave me an opportunity to talk to our representatives and regulators to bring to them our concerns and problems that we have. And like Lonnie said, first and foremost, it is the erosion that's taking place on Tangier. And I know today you hear a lot about sea level rise and climate change, and I want to say if me and Lonnie's not on board with that fully, don't hate us for it, because we've on Tangier we've gotten a lot of mail and phone calls that have been quite nasty because of our belief on that. But it is a major concern. We're losing a good part of the island, and we do need a seawall to protect us. And some folks do say that if we address the erosion problem and the island is still, sea level rise is occurring, the island's going to still go underwater. But we've addressed that back in the 1930s and 40s. There's parts of Tangier now where there's homes, trees growing, and our power station, power plant is there. That used to be wetlands, used to be marshland back in the 30s and 40s. So if the sea level is rising slowly, we can pump material onto the island to address that. But the erosion problem is immediate. I mean, you can take a mark along the shoreline and put a marker down like on the edge of the stage here. And after a storm, just like a week later, and go to it, and it'll be maybe this far offshore. So, I mean, with the sea level rise, it may be occurring, but I just don't see it. But with the erosion, you can see the effects of erosion almost daily. And it's quite a concern. It's always on the people's minds on the island. And we would like to protect Tangier to save it. And when I talk about saving Tangier, I'm not just talking about the island, the land. I'm talking about the people, our way of life, our culture, the total package. So some folks say that, they shouldn't spend that kind of money for such a small amount of people. But we've had folks that contribute to Tangier to help it out, and they've never been there, and they've just heard about our problem, and they want to help. And myself, as a citizen and as a community, we've sent money to communities all around the country who have experienced disasters. And to do that, I don't have to know those people or even have been there to be concerned with them. So it's encouraging when people do help out and feel concerned for Tangier. And we've been there for couple hundred years, and I'd like to stay. I'd like for it to be there a couple hundred more.
Thank you, Ooker. And then I'm going to skip Dr. Boicourt. We'll come back to you, but I'd like to go to, it used to be a nervous wreck, now she's calmed down. Mary Ada, thank you again for that wonderful cake making exercise. But if you tell us a little bit about you and your life, would be great.
Well, for those of you that weren't here earlier, my name's Mary Ada Marshall, and I was born and raised and still live on Smith Island. I live in a little village. Smith is made up of 3 villages, Ewell, Tylerton, and Rhodes Point, Ewell being the largest, and I met the love of my life and moved to Tylerton. I was from Ewell, and we've been married 52 years. And I get kind of choked up when I talk about home. I have 4 children. They've been very successful. One's a nationwide agent, one's a canvas maker and welder, perfectionist welder, and Maryland State Trooper, and my daughter works on Capitol Hill, 3 boys and a girl. They none live on the island because the rules and regulations was put so harsh on Waterman trying to make a living and trying to get started, they decided that they would move to the mainland. So I've been asked many times, they want us to move off. But how do you leave a home that you've put your sweat and blood and tears in, worked very hard together, we've been married 52 years, and pick up and leave? I have no problem, sorry to tell you, with Todd in my yard because I have gorgeous roses and pretty flowers, which I love doing. The lower part of the island doesn't have that because they do have a tidal problem. But about 15 years ago or so, the government gave us a bulkhead, riffraff, around the parts of the shorelines of Tylerton. And believe me, it has helped 120%. The Rhodes Point, which is the western part of our island, is getting a light barrier put in now. It's costing millions of dollars, I'm assuming. I don't really know the charge of it. But they've been working there since, I guess they've been working there maybe 6 or 8 months, and it's not complete yet, but they're going around the outer perimeter of Rhodes Point, which is the village that faces the Chesapeake Bay. We're a little bit protected from the bay, although I can see it from my front door. I know that the bulkheads helped down home so much, and Ewell is still in need of the bulkhead. So, Ooker, it does work. The seawall is what we need. I would hope that it's enough funding not only for Tangier. The difference in those 2 and us, they're Virginia and we're Maryland, state of Maryland, but there's only a few miles between the 2 islands. We all had the same lifestyle. We all pull for the same thing. And it's hard to sit and say, will you leave? You know, your age kind of takes care of that. When you can't get off island, if it's a storm or something, we do have 911 helicopter service, which is very good to us. But sometimes they can't fly due to weather. So it is a concern as you get older. And Everett, he don't have them concerns. Them long legs could go anywhere. But Dwight's a little bit more feeble. So, we do listen to our children, but they think we're stubborn. But how do you look at your grandson or your granddaughter and say, we don't have a place for you to crab anymore? They love to fish off, we live right on the water, they love to fish off the end of the pier. They love to go and pop up skiff. Dwight enjoys taking them around inside the little guts and finding, we call it corking, go pick up a buoy. We spent part of the week with my daughter, and our grandson has one of his buoys he found on the shoreline, hanging in his bedroom. I mean, those things probably to you don't mean much, but to us it's priceless. That is our life, it's the way we live. We've worked together side by side, whether it's in seafood business, the cake industry come along, and that was something I never dreamed would ever happen in my lifetime. It was just, I believe I was where God wanted me to be. That's how I've always done. If I lived in California and I saw those hunks of land falling down, then I'd be scared. But I'm not scared to live on Smith Island.
Thank you. And Everett, is wonderful to watch this young man grow up, and then really wonderful to watch him turn into a pastor, and particularly wonderful to have him return after a 14-year hiatus. back to Smith Island. So,
Good evening, everyone. It's good to have you all here. I appreciate the opportunity. Don, I do want to take a second and just thank you for giving us the platform to be able to speak what we see on the island. So we appreciate you and all you've done with your organization. My name is Everett Landon. I am currently the pastor of Smith Island. My father was born and raised on Tangier Island. My mother was born and raised on Smith Island. Married to a wonderful wife, Carol Ann, who's sitting here. She was born and raised on Smith Island as well. We made our life together. I was born and raised on Rhodes Point. When we were married, we moved to Tylerton, had our home there, lived there for about 7 years. And while I was working on the water, that's where I received my call from God to go into the ministry. So I actually quit work that day to go in to share with her our new venture in life. And been in the ministry for 14 years, served 7 years at Sharp Times, 7 years not too far from here on Tillman Island, and got the call just in this past year to return to Smith Island. So the former pastor was moving up to Pennsylvania to be closer to family, and it gave me an opportunity to come back to the island. It is a wonderful and very unique opportunity for me to go back to the place that raised me and helped me to be who I am, both as a person and as a pastor. A lot of faith is very big over on the islands, and a lot of people I really looked up to helped shape me in my faith, sent me away from the island to be an inspiration, hopefully, to teach others about Christ, about faith, and then being able to return and offer my services and what I have learned to the people of the island. Being pastor over there, you're sort of the, I guess, the unofficial mayor of the island with no law enforcement. Church is central to everything we do on the island. And although erosion and the debate about sea level rise is one issue, as a pastor and as a people, we face many obstacles. The population, the aging, of the people that are over there, the regulations that we see on the water, and, the decline in the water business. So all this plays a role in the future of the island. So we do have a lot to work out, a lot of issues to deal with. But I am confident that God sent me back for, such a time as this. Growing up there, understanding the way of life, seeing the problems that we have, certainly with the erosion, and now maybe being in a prominent position to be able to be an advocate for the people of the island and to help them to have a voice as well. Again, that's why I'm so thankful for the opportunity here today, just to be able to have that voice and just to be able to share with you. So, what does the future hold for the island? Well, I don't know. I don't think there's any model, any scientist, any pastor could possibly be able to tell you what the future holds, not just for Smith Island, for anything. Although we look to the past, it's probably more of an indication of what's going to happen in the future. And with a lot of things declining, it leaves a lot of things uncertain. But I am sure of one thing, that regardless of whether or not people remain on Smith Island or not, God has certainly gifted us with a tremendous amount of faith. And whether we stay or whether we someday have to go, we're going to hold true to that faith. And I'm just certainly thankful that God has put me in this position. Thank you.
well, thank you, Pastor. And I think we all recognize this is a Sunday. I wanted to start with a series of questions. I'm going to start with Pastor Everett. This being a Sunday and this being this winter, could you tell us a little bit about the difficulty with the freeze? And what I'd like to do is tell some stories about why we should care about these islands. Just kind of dig deep in kind of some human interest stories, and then we'll come back to the erosion problem. But can you tell us a little bit about the winter and the visitation and how difficult it was for you to be here today?
Okay. Well, the winter's been kind of interesting. It always is over on Smith Island. Over here on the mainland, we get snow. It stops everything for about a day or two. You get a tremendous blizzard. It stops everything for a few more days. On Smith Island, it's a lot different. Snow can slow things down, but for us, it's the cold weather. When cold weather comes, we get a freeze. We are not able to move around from island to island. With Smith Island, you have the three communities, Ewell and Roach Point, and they're connected by roadways and bridges. Tylerton is the one that is apart from itself. So Smith Island being an isolated island, Tylerton is an isolated community on an isolated island. So it can get pretty interesting. The travel for the pastor on a Sunday is I would start in Ewell, and then I would preach there first, and then I would get in a boat and go to Tylerton, preach there, get in a boat, and then go back to Roach Point, preach there, then get in a car and ride back up to Ewell. Well, it's a little bit different for me because the parsonage is currently being renovated and I'm in a rental. The rental is on Tylerton, so now I have to get in a boat, go up to Ewell, preach there, get in a boat, come back to Tylerton, preach there, get back in the boat, go to Roach Point, preach there, then get back in the boat and come back to Tylerton where I'm staying. So it does get kind of interesting with logistics in that area. So then getting back and forth. Now when it's not froze up, we get back and forth by boat, and certainly that's with visitations through the week, Bible studies on Wednesdays, and and office work, things of that nature. I think you had two questions. What was the? Yeah,
just this winter, the ice interrupted your flow a little bit, and just it was difficult for you to be here, given the fact that it was, you haven't had the visitation of the churches as you normally would have on an ice-free world.
Right. Yeah, and with the freeze that we've had, I've not been able to get to all three churches at all in January. I wasn't able to get to Ewell and Roach Point because of the freeze up, so I was able to preach to Tylerton for a couple Sundays. And then we had a thaw, and I was able to get to Roach Point and Ewell for another Sunday. But then we were having issues with the heat to Tylerton, so I wasn't able to to preach there. Then we had a youth trip that took us to Ocean City, so that took me out for another Sunday. And lo and behold, here I am for another Sunday. So like I told you earlier, I might not have a job when I get back.
Well, as you pointed out before, there's a lot of faith. I think they'll hang in there with it. But we appreciate you being with us today. I want to stick on the winter theme for a second. I keep on telling people that Lonnie is the top waterman on Tangier, and he corrects me every single time. And we decided at lunch that maybe he was number 2 waterman, so he's one of the top watermen. But the story behind this winter tells a lot about why I think that, why I've always called him the top waterman. But Lonnie, this winter and the freeze up, tell us what that meant for Tangier and what that meant for you.
Well, the freeze up, I guess started right after Christmas. I guess was it the first week in January? And it went on for 2 weeks. But after 4 or 5 days, I got tired of sitting around. I said, I'm going to work tomorrow, and God. So I go out, Worcester, and, take the boat out, break ice, go out and work. And for 4 or 5 days, I was the only boat working. Some people says that's crazy or whatever. It may be, but I feel comfortable doing it. But, the community as a whole, all the boats are staying in. It creates a hardship, somewhat. When your boat stays in, there's no income. It's not like you're getting a paycheck every Friday. You have to go out and you have to make the money, to feed your family or pay the bills or whatever. So it's not an easy way of life, but I spent 18 or 20 years as a waterman and then took a sabbatical for another 25 years and worked for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And about 4 years ago, wasn't happy with my work. My wife says, why don't you quit your job? You're not happy. And so I said, I don't know what I'll do. She said, go back on the, work on the water. I said, I don't know about that. I'll try that, but I don't know if I'll be successful or not. But jumped right back into it, and everything seems to be working okay.
Well, what he's not going to tell you, I'll tell you. There was a freeze up on Tangier, and freeze up means that the boats are restricted from coming and going. And so, can you tell us a little bit about that, Lonnie, or should I drag it out of you? So, the fact that you were the only one that worked for a number of days.
I was the only one worked for 1 week there, for a whole week, and several other days, but yes, I did do that.
Yeah, so Tangier is, for 2 weeks, it had basically no access. They brought helicopters in, they brought an ice cutter to bring supplies, and one crazy waterman kept on going out every single day to catch oysters, and that's what it takes to be the top waterman on Tangier. Well, let me ask, I'm going to pick with Lonnie for a second, and I mentioned before he has a great reputation, and there's a million stories I could choose from on this one, but it's a nice human interest story that I think tells a lot about the character of the people on these islands. But Lonnie, can you tell us about the time you found a guy's wallet and the conditions around that?
Yeah, this was back before, the cut out, dredging crabs, in the state of Virginia. We used to go out and dredge crabs the way we dredge oysters. And I was dredging back, and I'm going to say it was the early 80s because I have, or maybe late 80s, up at Smith Point Lighthouse, which was, about 100 feet of water, 90, 100 feet of water. And I was dredging, and my mate come to me and says, we're just caught a wallet. So I pulled the wallet up and started looking at it and found a phone number. And as I looked through, it had $400 or $500 in it. And I said, I better call this guy, who's lost his wallet. And anyway, I called the guy, I got the phone number there. And it was 18 months since he had lost that wallet. He said, you don't find my wallet. I lost that 90 feet of water, and I seen it go down. I said, that's where I caught it, 90 feet of water. So anyway, we had a little debate, and, I sent the money and everything back, and he sent it back to me. And we split, the $200 a piece or something like that. He said, buy something for your kids. So.
Yeah, not everybody would send the $400 back, but speaks a lot to the character of the islands. Marietta, there's a fear that your family at some point, you and Dwight in the front seat over there, might pick up and leave Smith Island and go to Crisfield. Is there any validity to that? And tell me what goes through your mind when you think about that.
It's hard to answer. We've thought about it because of our age, like I said earlier, and to be closer to our children and our grandchildren. It's a struggle for them to take off work and come see us. It's expensive. Two of my sons has their own boats, very good boat captains. But our oldest granddaughter goes to Drexel College, and might say she's a straight A student, and very proud of them, how successful they are. But they don't, and they'll say, you need to come on this side, because I have a lot of health issues. Dwight's pretty healthy, but I have a lot of issues. And you need to slow down. So where do you stop in life? If you sit down, you're going to rust away. And I'm not one for sitting. I enjoy work very much. So some of the women home call me Martha Stewart. They'll say, all right, Mary Stewart, what are you going to remodel now? So I put a lot of thought into the little Cape Cod home that we have, and it's what I enjoy. The walls have memories, the rooms, all 50-some years, you know what you create and do in your home. And then the cakes come along. Well, I got the perfect kitchen for, not here, but for making a cake. I had my kitchen arranged that my Corian counter is in front of me, my double ovens to the side of me, and I just can turn out a cake like I told the class in about 20 minutes to a half an hour. And so it's what I know. I don't, the kids give us iPads for Christmas. That is like Dutch to me. I'm serious. We're trying to learn it. And like I told the class, if you want a cake, you don't email it. You either call me on the phone or I ain't getting back to you. But it's just what I know I want to do well. And I love what I do. I'm not ashamed of what I do. I'm a good homemaker, love gardening. I've worked in the seafood industry. I make crab cakes for the local market, who my oldest son owns that, and I ship them all over the country. But how in the world, and I ask yourself this question, could you walk out of your door, turn the key, and not come back? Big decision. And I just don't know if we'll ever come to that unless our health makes us move off island. Because Dwight and I have had this conversation. Should we do it? Shouldn't we do it? Should we go? Should we stay? And this is constantly on my mind. You can't help it. As far as the sinking of the island, buddy. Erosion, yes, it's there. I know the erosion's there. But I don't think we're going to sink. I really don't. When I was little, let me tell you this story. So when I was little, like 8 or 10 years old. I'd hear Mom and Dad talking about it. They said, the island's going to sink away. And I'm 70, so I thought to myself, geez, I had slept in a twin 4-poster bed. I said, if I get in this bed, I've always been heavy. So I said, if I get in this bed, is these legs of this bed going to go down through the house and we're going to sink when we go to sleep? I mean, it's been constantly talked about. But we're still here. I can still plant my flowers in my yard as long as God will give me the strength to do it. And tide doesn't affect them unless it's a hurricane. And then we worry about the mainland people more than what we do ourselves. We've got the sense to know if it's 80-mile wind, 100-mile wind, we evacuate. I respect the nature of God, his wrath, because we are very close to the bay, not very many feet out from the Chesapeake Bay. And when those seas, especially if you get a surge, they roll in big and you can see them splashing right in front of your home. And the sprays of the salt water come on your windows. It's an eerie feeling. So I leave that up to Dwight and his respect of nature. He's been a waterman his whole life. He'll say, Mary, we need to go to one of our children's. We wouldn't have to do that if we lived on the mainland. But how can you walk out on a lifetime of what you've put your sweat and blood in? So my answer to you, Don, is I still don't know. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for us.
Mary, you've got a son here. I'll ask him if he wants to.
Yeah, he does.
No, he don't.
And that's the main part of the thing. That is home to our 4 children, our 6 grandchildren, and our in-laws. We call it home. Home. Home is where you hang your stocking at Christmas. You have your good dinners. So it's just, as long as I'm able, I intend to stay there, is my answer. And as long as Tom Horton keeps bringing students out there for me to give a cake demo to, I may not be standing there till my feet goes to my knees. It's wearing me out. But I am going to cut down a little bit on the work because the kids goes on to me that I work too much. But I love what I do, and it's not educated what I do. I'm a 12th grade student, and things have changed so much. And as far as the iPads, iPods, I don't understand them, but I'm trying to learn. But that's not my thing. My thing is with my hands. I've worked with my hands my whole life, quilting and cakes and working in seafood, cooking for this bunch, whenever, whatever. And I ain't figured out why I'm the only woman up here either. So, but all in all, it will be the last straw. It won't be because of the sinking of the island that I leave. I hope I can leave that home to our children, that they can enjoy what they've enjoyed all their lives. It will always be home.
Well, Mary, I've been going to Smith Island all my life since I was a kid, and I know that if you and Dwight left Tarleton, I think Tarleton would fall. I really do. I believe that with all my heart. I really do.
Well, my family's always been active, community oriented.
I know you have. There's no doubt.
Now, our oldest son has a little store there. It wouldn't even be a store there, a little general store with sandwiches and canned goods or whatever we need. And so if we left, I know he would leave. And so that would take the store from Tylerton, and I don't see anybody filling those shoes financially is pretty much what I'm talking about. And unless it gets so difficult that we can't make it or whatever, I intend to stay there. So that's kind of my answer, Don.
Well, I want to turn attention to, I think, the most famous celebrity on the Eastern Shore in the last 6 months has been Mayor Eskridge, the emissary to 21 different countries, and in the center of a lot of controversy, a man behind a lot of cameras. But Mayor, can you tell us a little bit about how this all started and tell us the story of the odyssey you've been on in the last 6 months for a crabber and mayor of a small community?
Yes, we've always had folks coming over home doing stories about the erosion and talking about sea level rise. And CNN came over, I believe it was in May, and did a story on Tangier. And on the erosion and sea level rise, and he also focused on the support that Donald Trump received from Tangier. And we have a small, what used to be our health clinic, small office in the back, and the men in the afternoons we go there and talk about everything from politics to crabbing and oystering, and we call it the Situation Room. And so CNN came in there, they set up like 2 or 3 cameras, GoPros all around the wall, lights, and I mean, it was packed in there. And they were just interviewing the Waterman, and they asked me about what I thought about Donald Trump. And I said, I love him like I do family. And anyway, the story went out there, and apparently somebody on the president's staff saw the story and told him he needed to look at it. And after seeing the piece that CNN did, and realizing that he had like 90% of the vote out there, he wanted to give me a phone call. And I mean, I was out crabbing. It was a Monday morning. I was out crabbing, and here comes my son to me in his boat and a friend, and they're all rung up and excited, and said, Dad, my son said, Dad, you got to get home and stay by the phone. The president's going to call you. And I said, President of what? He said, Donald Trump wants to speak with you. I said, yeah, sure he does. And he said, no, we've received the information from a good source that you need to get home. They're trying to get in touch with you. So, I mean, I said, no, somebody's playing a joke or what? I mean, it's a nice day. It's a good catch of crabs, and I'm going home to sit by the telephone. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And I went home, and I waited for a couple hours and no call, and I shed soft crabs in the summertime, so I had to go back to my shedding operation to take care of soft crabs. And I was talking to a guy who was out on his boat and on the VHF, and he said, has POTUS called yet? I said, no. I said, I got to go to the shanty and take care of some soft crabs. He said, you can't do that when the president's going to call. But anyway, I went out for half an hour, came back, and sure enough, I got a phone call. The lady says, I'm with the office of the president. President Donald Trump would like to speak with you if it's possible. I said, it is possible. And so he got on the phone, and through the whole conversation, just hard to comprehend that Donald Trump was on the other end of the phone. I mean, to be speaking with the president who called me at home, I mean, just blew my mind. And but it was one of the reasons I voted for him. I mean, he's a down-to-earth guy. He was very easy to speak with. We talked briefly about the support he received on Tangier and erosion problems, sea level rise, climate change, and of course, the president and myself were both on the same page with the sea level rise and climate change. With the climate change, we both see changes. We're not convinced that it's man-made, that I'm sure man plays a part in it. But and then with the sea level rise, he said, you've been there for a couple of 100 years, you'll be there for hundreds more. But we were talking about sea level rise. The erosion thing he agreed with was a whole different issue. And but because of that, we started receiving phone calls and media from all around the world, and we've had media there from, like you said, 21 different countries, and we just had a guy from Poland there a couple weeks ago. And my wife and I would be walking down the street, or I'll be coming in my boat, and the tourists coming in on the boat or walking down the street would say, "How you doing, Mayor?" And my wife said, who are those people? I said, I have no idea. And he said, we saw you on TV at home. And
You didn't tell him I didn't vote for him, did you?
Yeah, this guy over here, he didn't vote for Donald Trump. And he said, he'll never be elected. He said, just give it a little while, and people will be saying, Trump who? And but, they're not saying that, so. But I was down to the dock, and there was a group of people. They got me to. They wanted me to put my name on a hat they had bought from Tangier and on a book and some postcards, and my wife looks at me and she says, they're creating a monster. But
I agree.
it's, and we've had support because of it. We've gotten some nasty letters, and just got a letter last week, guy from San Diego. He said he hopes that we all drowned out there for voting for Donald Trump. And I mean, if I was from California, I wouldn't wish ill for on people with what's going on out there. But I just am paying attention to it. Myself, I don't understand that kind of hate. I mean, you can vote for different folks and have a difference of opinion on something and still be civil with each other. And so, with the phone calls and letters, and we've had some positive letters as well, but I don't wish any ill on the folks. It's okay. But I just want to say that, like with the erosion, the pastor touched on it that, Tangier and Smith, they're spiritual islands. We depend heavily on God. I mean, God gives us our resource, but He doesn't put the food on the table. We've got to go out and catch it. We've got to do our part. And it's the same way with the erosion. We're working on getting a seawall to be protected, but at the same time, I believe God will take care of us until then. I mean, He's done it for these hundreds of years. I mean, in Job, God said that He told the oceans that you can come this far and no farther, and your proud waves will have to stop here. Mm-hmm. So we have to do our part, but first and foremost, we're dependent on God to provide our health and provide the resource. And but I do hope we get the protection we need. And I just want to add one of the things I bring up with the government to get the help we need. Over the years, we've had a lot of people from home to serve in the military, and they've dropped what they were doing and went all around the world. And I lost a brother in Vietnam in '69, and now we're to a point. Folks on Tangier are very self-reliant. They don't like to ask for help, but we're facing something right now we can't address on our own. We need help on, and we're 50 miles or so from D.C., and now we need help, and we're hoping that we'll get the help from the government before it's too late. It was one of the things that Donald Trump said. We voted for him for a number of reasons, but he wanted to relax some of the regulations, and we've experienced that on trying to get a seawall. Studies are done, and you do need studies, but we've been studied to death, and we just need the project to be done.
And Trump loves building walls.
Yeah, well, I mean, Donald Trump said he wants to build a wall. We'll take a wall on Tangier. So,
Start there.
yeah, start there. Donald Trump said America first, and I mean, I understand that. We need to help people all around the world, but he's the president of the United States. It should be America first with him. Just like I'm the mayor of Tangier Island. If I was to take what meager resources we have and start spending it on Smith, I wouldn't be mayor long.
You wouldn't?
So,
God forbid.
Ooker, we'll take some of your money.
with me, it's Tangier first, and so.
Ain't you something?
But we love you dearly up there.
I'd vote for you next election.
I hope you do.
Well, Ooker, you've kind of started helping people around the world. You're the only crabber I know with a boat named the Sri Devi. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, my wife and my wife's in the audience. I won't point her out, but she's in the audience. We had two boys, and then my wife decided she always wanted a girl. We had complications with our last son, and she said, maybe we should look into adoption. And I said, sure. And she said, we could get our little girl that way. And so we did. We looked into foreign adoption, and we adopted a 4-year-old girl from India. And a couple years after that, we adopted an 8-year-old girl. And a couple years later, two sisters that were, I believe, 11 and 12. And they were all in the same orphanage from Hyderabad, India. So, some of the reporters that's been home, they said, "Is your population very diverse out here?" I said, "Well, it was at one time." But they're living off the island, one in Texas, Alabama, Salisbury, Maryland, and Charlottesville, Virginia. My younger son lives and works at Liberty University and Thomas Road Baptist Church in Lynchburg. And my older son's a crabber.
And he's the number one.
He's number one, yeah.
He's number one.
You're number one old crabber.
But it's, I'm glad he chose to work on the water. I didn't force him into it, but I'm glad he chose to. And but I would like for the island to be there for my grandkids and so on.
I'd like to transition, looking ahead a little bit. We've mentioned a bit about the science and studies, and we are honored, really, that the world's expert in estuaries, tides, and currents is on the stage, and not an easy position to be in between Smith Islanders that are fearful for their future. But Bill somehow, in a weak moment, agreed to come up. But thanks, Bill, and look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Well, I want to still come back and eat on the island and eat Maria's food, so I have to say something.
So he's got to say right.
Well, here's the first thing. I'm going to mention erosion. And there is a relationship between erosion and sea level rise, but you guys got it right. I'm outvoted anyway. And the erosion is the problem right now. There's something we can see. I can see it. Ooker can see it easier because he's surrounded by water. You can too. You put a stick in. One storm can move that shoreline back pretty fast. The good news about erosion, if there is any good news, is we can do something about it. We can build a wall. Yep. And I think that your pleas for a wall are incredibly well taken, and I wish everybody would rally around and help out this process, because it's really not that expensive. And it's more than I make in a year, but it doesn't really cost that much, and it will buy us time. Sea level rise is there. It's lurking in the background. We don't see it. I don't see it. None of us really see it because it's so slow. We have evidence, some of us more than others. Some of us believe the evidence more than others. But what it does is when the sea level rise comes up, it accelerates the rate of erosion. There's a connection there. And exactly what the connection is in terms of quantitative stuff, we're a little bit fuzzy about, but it's clearly there. Sea level rise is a good thing in one sense. For the last 10,000 years, the last ice age, sea level has been going up in Chesapeake Bay. Without sea level rise, we would have no Chesapeake Bay. So, that's the time scale, a lot longer than the kind of time scale that we're worried about in terms of whether you go or stay on Smith Island area. But the acceleration, which we now are looking at, and we had the last governor asked to get a bunch of us together. Don Bosch was the lead of a task force. And we were lucky to invite anybody we wanted. We had about maybe 50 people. And we learned a lot from each other and came up with the best guess of what by 2050 and by 2100. We focused on 2050 because we felt that those projections were a lot more accurate. And we came up with a range of 1 foot at least to around a little over 2 feet by that time, and my best guess was around 1.4 feet. If we're right, that 1 foot is twice the rate of sea level rise in the last century, so it's a considerable acceleration. Now, you might ask how right we are. We did come up with, you heard the number of 6 feet, Tom, is that right? By 2100, that's definitely possible, but a lot of things can happen between now and then in terms of what we can do to control greenhouse gases. But anyway,
Yeah, that would be if we don't do much.
We're very good. But so we might ask about how good we are at making those projections. And I go back, as we usually sell ourselves as infallible, but there is a story when Don Baugh was running about 35 facilities around Chesapeake Bay with Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and Hurricane Sandy shows up, and he calls me up because I was advising other people at the same time, real time, because we have real-time tide gauges all over the bay. And he said, Bill, what's going to go on? I said, don't worry. I mean, the eye of Sandy was going seaward of Ocean City. The back wind was going to blow the water out of the bay. Not a problem. So Sandy trundles along. It joins that big low-pressure system up north. Turns it into an extratropical storm. Well, that sounds kind of benign compared to a hurricane, but it's 10 times worse. And did its thing. It was an unusually large storm, 1,000 kilometers across. It's huge. So I'm keeping up with Don, and Don emails me and sends a picture from Lonnie Moore of Tangier, the water up to about here. This is the highest in his life, and it's still coming up. And I emailed back to Don. I said, start worrying. Start worrying. Yeah. I hadn't met Lonnie at that point. But Lonnie, of course, was right. He said, the bishop's head, can't see on the map, was actually not doing much. I was watching Baltimore and south. We have at the time we had a inundation prediction system, which was funded by Noah Ming Lee at Horn Point, and I and a few others were working on it. It was very accurate. And we were making projections. We saw things were starting to go down. So Baltimore's going down in the north, and I think I forgot what it was below Lewis said. It was down in the next gauge down. They're going down, not to worry. Then we get Lonnie's picture, and the water's coming up in Tangier, and we went, oh gosh. What we didn't do was watch all our gauges and all our part of the model. We never conceived of the back circulation coming around from Sandy, blowing down directly down the Potomac across the bay and blowing the water up. This is more complex than this, but basically blew the water up on Smith Island, Tangier, and made it much worse in Crisfield. 200 houses were flooded there. Yes. And the level was up the Nanticoke and up the Wicomico were at Isabel levels. A friend had a boat in a covered storage. It smashed this whole mast coming up on it. Those were so we didn't really know how to. The National Weather Service came to us. We were working with them, and they said, Bill, we had trouble with Crisfield. I said, well, you blew it too, huh? and it was really a learning curve. The models were correct. We just didn't. Now the uncertainties with our projections, we would claim that they're so small that we really can't hide behind them, and that is a worry. But coming back to the wall, I think the wall is well intentioned. It's not going to be really that much. There's a lot shorter than Lonnie we were talking about.
But what I'd like to do is start off with Lonnie and ask Lonnie a little bit about what's he want for the future. What's he want for his life, and what's he want for his children's and his grandchildren's lives.
Well, I think for my life, if we do nothing, my life is going to be on Tangier. I really believe that, with all my heart. But I got a 40-year-old daughter, or 39 years old, and 4 grandkids, and I do fear for them a lot. Without a seawall, my grandkids and maybe even my daughter's not going to remain on the island. They're going to have to move to the mainland because erosion is going to overtake us. And I believe, 25, 30 years that's going to happen. 25, 30 years, most likely I'm going to be gone. So, if I had to say one thing, what I wanted, the seawall is going to be so that my child can, continue on. She's a school teacher, special ed teacher on the island, that she can end up her profession, raise her 4 kids, and then for my 4 grandkids to grow up, with, what I experienced, my lifetime for. Growing up on Tangier, there's nothing like it. I don't care where you've, been brought up. There's no better place to raise kids or grandkids. My grandkids live a half mile or less from me, and they come up every day, on their bicycles or tricycles or whatever up to visit with me. And I just fear that that's going to leave, if something hasn't done. And I think with an audience like this, they can go out and tell people. We've got, people that can tell the story in D.C. I see some right on the front row. So I think that, we are going to get help, just when it is. And hopefully it's going to be before my grandkids have to leave. So.
Thank you, Lonnie. Lonnie's pointing to Representative Keith Gillespie from the Chesapeake Bay Commission and representative of Pennsylvania. So get some of that Pennsylvania money here, Lonnie. So it's actually not D.C. But so Pastor Everett, I'd be interested in your thoughts about the future. You're a young man. You're going to see a lot of the Smith Island, and what's your hope and dream, and what do you see in the future?
My hope and dream is certainly for the island to thrive. I mean, you can do that in a number of ways. As I'd said in my other remarks, there's a lot of issues pressing, for the island right now. But one of the main ones that we have to address is certainly the erosion. And we talk a lot about sea level rise, and and there's debate, with some of the ones up here. But not only that, there's a lot of scientists are at odds with each other on just how that's going to look. So what's important? What's important for the island? What's my hopes and dreams? As an advocate, we want to. As an advocate for the island, for me as pastor, you want to address the pressing issues. As I'd said, the erosion is a big issue. You think of it along the lines of if you're in an accident and you had a broken leg and you were bleeding a lot, when the paramedics got there, you don't want them to start treating your broken leg, right? Right away you want them to apply pressure to stop the bleeding. We'll take care of the broken leg later. Let's stop the bleeding, then we can take care of the leg. On the island, the erosion is it's something that's bleeding profusely. Sea level rise is very minimal. If in fact sea level rise is very minimal. But the erosion is tremendous. I mean, in certain areas, I think, was it Ooker, I think, was saying you could put a stick down and within a year's time, you're, 5, 6 foot, sometimes even months, the land is eroded. So one of the main issues is address the erosion. Certainly the jetties do that, the wall would help. It's something that a lot of the people of the island are really trying to get help for, to stop the erosion. I mean, I think of the island, it's a wonderful place to raise children. I have 3 children, one's married, lives here in Talbot County. I have 2 girls, 15 and 12, and they're still at home with us. And we were so blessed being able to have the opportunity to take them back to the island so that they could experience growing up there. The seasonal high tides, and they get to run out and in their bare feet and get wet and splash around. The opportunity to get in a skiff and go visit their friends and stuff like that. There's a worry that comes with that, but it's also them learning who they are, where they come from, the history of the island. It's all about the water, working the water. It's about boats. I heard one man say, people go down to Williamsburg and they pay a lot of money to watch people dress up in historical costumes to reenact history. I mean, it's a huge business. They do that with battles up in Gettysburg and all over. But Smith Island is living history. It is here and now. It is part of who we were in the past, and we have managed to hold on to a lot of that. A lot of the traditions that we have, the way we speak, we certainly get that a lot. Even how we, date. As I'd said, my wife was from Smith Island. You were talking about ice earlier and how it affected me just in the past couple months. But the weather plays a factor in everything that we do. When I was dating my wife, we had a freeze up. So what do you do in a freeze up when you're dating someone and they live at the other part? You walk on the ice. So I, remind her that every once in a while that I walked on water for her. And I don't know of many other places in the world where you can live that way. If in fact the future holds that the island will wash away and we have to move, it is going to be a huge loss, not just for the people of the island, but for the people of the Chesapeake Bay and those that are affected by it, and for the country. I mean, you just don't have places like that anymore. And if they are, they're certainly few and far between. So for me, as a pastor, I'm very hopeful. I know God can do the impossible. I mean, that's His business. I believe there's a lot of things, a lot of potential for the island. And we're going to certainly do what we can to help save it. And I know, with the help of all of you, that would be preferable as well, because we certainly can't do this alone. As we said, we're very independent people. We want to figure things out on our own, but it's got to the point now where we're asking for help, and we certainly don't mind that. It's something that's needed. When the hurricane had come through, was it Sandy, I think, with the buyout? Was it Sandy?
Sandy.
And they had the issue of the buyout, buying out homes from Smith Island, and we saw that as very detrimental to our island. And people were putting out emails. I put out emails to my friends, and it was just amazing the response that just I had gotten from the amount of people that were interested in the island, people that were out of state, people that had never been to the island, but they were just so passionate about the history and the culture, and just the people that are there, and the impact it makes on the bay with the estuaries and the crabs and the birds. And it is a very important place for the bay and for us. And just people just came out from everywhere to help. And I know everyone's interested in this topic: erosion, sea level rise. The islands. Are they going to be there or are they not? So I'm hopeful. I'm in that business. I'm going to stay hopeful, and we're going to do what we can with what God gives us, and we know that there's going to be others like you and others to help us achieve that. And for that, I'm grateful.
Well, I can see why you're a pastor. I just want to leave it for closing comments for Marietta and Mayor Ooker and Bill, and then Tom and myself. Any Mary, anything?
I guess my closing comment would be, number one, I just as well go home and preach to the young couples to start adopting children because they're getting puppies instead of children. So Tangier Island is a lot larger in population. They have, what do you have now?
460.
About 460. When I grew up on the island as a teenager, it was around 600. We're down to around 225. It's all three parts put together. So that's not a lot of people. But half of the property owners on Tylerton are from Pennsylvania, which is quite a large state. They love their homes there. They come back often. And then people like Tom and Don and you, they come once and they see something in us that they like. I don't know if it's their cooking, if it's their personality, if it's the serenity, good kayaking little areas. Don't know. Kind of food for thought on that. But they still return. They still come back, and they still want to find the natives. Now, you all think we talk funny, but I think you talk funny. So it's just, not really. It's just, we've all got our own brogues. Tangier talks like this. We talk with the long A's. They all say our ancestors are from England. But we are where God wants us to be. We were born there. We were raised there. We were raised in a waterman's family. We're hard workers. A day's work for the women would be get up at 3 a.m. Now, this is just the women. The man works just as hard. But you women that has jobs at 6 or 7 o'clock, in summertime, we would get up at 3, pick a couple bushels of crabs, cut soft crabs in the shanties and wrap and pack them, and make 4 or 5 cakes on the side, do our laundry, make our beds, cut our grass. I mean, this is in my younger day. I don't do all that right now. But I mean, this is how the younger women are still working. They don't mind work, but they succeed in what they do. They don't wear high heels. They don't get manicures, nothing like that. To me, getting a hairdo, which I could really use after the rain, or putting on artificial fingernails to go on a cruise. And some people say, why do you go on a cruise when you live on the island? That's another one. But it's a relaxing, catered to atmosphere that we enjoy. And we work for this. It's not give us. And our whole life has been centered around hard work, but the work that we love, that we were raised into, and wouldn't trade it for nothing. There you are, Brother Bill.
Well, I want to say that the issues clearly, there's some scientific issues here, but they pale in comparison to the loss of culture, the potential loss of culture. And in terms of science, the most important thing, and it's not rocket science, is where to put that wall, how high to build it, and more importantly, how soon can we get it?
I want to thank you, Don, and Tom, and just for this opportunity. And I do thank everybody for coming. And just real quick to tell you what a seawall can do. On the west side of Tangier, we were losing 25 shoreline a year. And they did put a rock seawall on the west side. They completed that in 1989. And since then, we haven't lost 1 inch of shoreline. So it does work.
It does.
And that's what we need all around the island. But I love Tangier. I love its people. And I want to preserve Tangier. I want to save Tangier. It's hard work working on the water, but it's rewarding. I love what I do, and I love the extras, the wildlife, the birds and the sea turtles, and I do stop to enjoy all that. I stop to smell the roses. My son goes on to me sometimes. He says, you kill too much time with the side things. But I love what I do, but I do love the extras. I mean, I would like to see it preserved.
Lonnie, any last comments?
No, I don't have anything else.
Mr. Horton.
Oh, I agree with Ooker and Bill and Lonnie on that seawall. I think it's worth the investment. I really just hope the rest of my life I can keep going out to Tangier and Smith to argue with them about sea level rise. So that would
Can't
be
do it much longer. You're 70-some years old, man.
Well, I'm going to hang in there a while.
I mean, this sea level rise, I mean, it's not a political thing to me. I guess I'm sort of like the folks in Missouri, show me state. You show me the sea levels rising and I'll shout it. You know, I mean, I'm not denying it. It's not a political issue. I focus on what I can see and what's happening today. And but it's you know, some folks make fun of it, but it's a serious thing, and you know, I'm concerned about the island.
Well, I think rather than entertain questions just in the interest of time, what we'll do is we'll have a reception. You'll be able to ask questions individually to these people. And just my closing comments are, you know, when the minister of Smith Island said, "Don't mess it up," to me 40 years ago, that was tough. You know, I was not sure, you know, how not to mess it up because, you know, we were coming in for the first time in 350 years. And so in a way, I appreciate the opportunity to give back to the island. And, you know, I see the need, and I see that this is not a typical museum. This is the museum, the living museum that Pastor Everett talked about. This is, you know, if we lose these islands, you know, if we think about Holland's Island, we've seen this in our lifetime, or Sharp's Island, that was in our generation before us lifetime. You know, these are gone. And so Holland's Island, just, you know, we could think about it and maybe read about it, but the people that were there are no longer there. And so here we have an opportunity to save a couple of islands. You know, we just passed a federal budget, and whether you like it or not, there's a whole bunch of money. They don't know where it's going to go. It'd be great if it went for positive things. Yeah. And so my hope is that we save these islands. My also hope is I believe in science. I believe in, you know, our footprint, our carbon footprint. I believe that we ought to be working now. So we get, you know, it's not tomorrow's problem, it's today's problem. That this is a call to action. We need to act on that. We need to join environmental groups. We need to join groups like the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum is doing great work, as well as lots of other great environmental groups here. And we also need to kind of help the islands when we can. So thank you all so much for the program tonight. And let me walk you through kind of the next steps, which is the reception. So the opportunity one-on-one to interact with these people. And the opportunity to eat some of that Smith Island layer cake that Marietta, we saw Marietta make the cake, so you know what that's like, but Lonnie's going to tell us a little bit about the oysters that we're going to sample. So tell us where you caught those, Lonnie.
Well, these oysters that I bought today I caught them Friday. I was out working, and I told Don I would pick these oysters out, hand-pick, you know, beautiful oysters. but I forgot to pick them out hand-picked. So end of the day, I had my limit, and I was on my way in. I said, I got to save one of these bushels for Don, and it's not hand-picked. But they are beautiful oysters. They were caught in 35 to 50 feet of water, and oysters are living in 50 feet, even in 70 feet. You know, we're catching them. So all the news is not bad about the oyster, you know, and no oxygen in the water, you know, that type of stuff. When you catch oysters thriving in 70 feet of water, things are good. So these were caught right east or southeast of Tangier Island, right due east and southeast of Tangier Lighthouse. And, you know, some of the taste, to me, they're the most tastiest oysters on the bay. But I think anybody, no matter who's oystering, are used to eating oysters from their area, thinks that same thing. So, but I think you're going to say these are the best oysters you've ever eaten.
Excellent. So one order of business, we have a sign-up sheet for more information about events from Upstream Alliance, from the Maritime Museum, and from Salisbury University. Please sign up, and we'll put you on our list. In terms of eating the cakes and oysters, the cakes are obviously to your left and oysters to your right. So if you could help us to stack the chairs and get them out of the way, that would be great. And finally, is there anything else that we're missing on the... I think that's it. Thank you all very much for coming out today.
We got to invite the sergeant.